My own sister stole my husband and got pregnant. I walked into their celebration with the one secret that made him collapse in tears. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. I still remember the ice in my veins that day. You know that feeling when you're so angry that you actually become calm? Like, eerily, unnervingly calm. That's where I was when I walked into Bellini's, my ex-husband Richard's favorite restaurant. The place he'd taken her on their first date while we were still married. The same place they were now celebrating, finalizing our divorce and their new beginning. With a baby on the way. God, even thinking about it now makes my hands shake a little. Sorry. I should back up. My name is Caroline. And 3 years ago, I was Caroline Sterling, married to Richard Sterling, the regional sales director for a major pharmaceutical company. We'd been married for 7 years. 7 years. It feels like a lifetime ago, looking back. Our life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. It was ours. It was built on lazy Sunday mornings with the newspaper spread across the kitchen table, the smell of coffee brewing, and the comfortable silence that only comes when two people know each other inside and out. It was built on inside jokes whispered across crowded rooms, on the way he'd always grab my favorite ice cream from the store without me having to ask. It was built on plans for a house with a bigger yard, plans for a trip to Italy we'd been saving for, plans for a future that I believed, with every fiber of my being, we would share. We had a rhythm. Tuesday was pasta night. Friday was for a cheap bottle of wine and a movie on the couch. We weren't exciting, not in the way you see in the movies. We were comfortable. We were steady. I thought that was enough. I thought that kind of quiet, dependable love was the kind that lasted forever. I first noticed something was off on a Thursday. It was always Thursdays. He started working late, which wasn't unusual in his line of work, especially with the pressure for that big promotion he was gunning for. But this was different. He'd come home around 9:30, smelling clean. Too clean. He smelled like he'd just showered at the gym, and his excuse was always the same. Long strategy meeting, he'd say, kissing my forehead. The kiss felt distant, like a habit rather than an act of affection. Just had to blow off some steam at the gym before heading home. You know how it is. And I believed him. That's what kills me the most looking back. I actually, truly believed him. But then came the cologne. It was a new scent, something sharp and musky, completely unlike the subtle, clean scent I had bought him for Christmas. Who wears expensive cologne to the gym at 8 p.m. on a weeknight? The question floated in my mind, but I pushed it away. You don't want to believe your whole life is a lie based on the smell of a cologne. You tell yourself you're being paranoid. You tell yourself to trust the man you built a life with. The excuses became more frequent. New product launch, honey. It's all hands on deck. Or, big presentation for the executives next week. We're all burning the midnight oil. And I'd nod, and make him a plate of warmed-up dinner, and listen as he talked about his stress, all the while a little knot of dread was tightening in my stomach. The distance between us was growing, not like a sudden chasm, but like a slow, creeping tide, and I was too busy working and trying to hold our life together to realize I was already underwater. My little sister, Eleanor. She's 5 years younger than me, and for my entire life, she was my person. My shadow, my confidant, my other half. When I scraped my knee as a kid, she was the one who ran to get the bandages. When I had my heart broken for the first time in high school, she was the one who sat with me all night, sharing a pint of ice cream and telling me that boy was an idiot anyway. I was there when she graduated from college, cheering louder than anyone. I helped her move into her first apartment, coached her through her first real job interview. We were Caroline and Eleanor. The Sterling sisters. An unbreakable team. When I married Richard, she stood beside me as my maid of honor, her eyes filled with happy tears as she gave a toast about how she'd never seen me so happy. Richard was like a brother to her. He helped her with her resume, gave her advice on her salary negotiations, and always made sure to include her in our holiday plans. He was family. So when Brenda, my friend from my book club, called me that Tuesday afternoon, my first instinct wasn't suspicion. It was confusion. Brenda's voice was shaky, hesitant. "Caroline, are you sitting down?" she asked. "I'm at my desk, Brenda." "What's wrong?" "You sound awful." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her take a deep breath. "Look, there's no easy way to say this, and I'm so sorry if I'm wrong, but I was at that wine bar downtown last night, the Gilded Grape. I was there for my coworker's birthday." "Okay," I said slowly, a cold feeling starting to prickle at the back of my neck. "I saw Richard," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He was with a woman. And Caroline, they weren't acting like colleagues." My world tilted slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, her words rushing out now, her hand was on his thigh. "His thigh, Caroline. And he was playing with her hair, and they were laughing, and leaning in so close. The way people do when they, you know." I remember gripping the edge of my desk, my knuckles turning white. "What did she look like, Brenda?" "Blonde," she said immediately. "Younger. Very pretty. She was wearing a red dress." A red dress. My mind flashed to a conversation I'd had with Eleanor just last week. She'd been so excited, telling me about a new dress she'd bought for a date. A slinky, red number she'd gotten on sale. No. It couldn't be. It was just a coincidence. A horrible, sickening coincidence. "I'm so sorry, Caroline," Brenda whispered. I thought you should know." I mumbled some thanks and hung up the phone. For a full 5 minutes, I just sat there, staring at my computer screen, the words on the legal brief I was drafting blurring into meaningless shapes. Then, I did what I always did when my world felt like it was spinning out of control. I called my sister. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice bright and cheerful. "Hey, big sis. What's up?" I tried to keep my own voice steady. "Hey, Ellie. Just calling to check in. How was your date the other night? The one you bought the red dress for?" There was a split second of silence. So tiny, most people would have missed it. But I didn't. "Oh. It was fine," she said, a little too quickly. "Yeah, it was good. Just some guy from work. Nothing serious." "Right," I said, the knot in my stomach twisting into a blade. "That's good." We chatted for a few more minutes about nothing, our parents, a funny show she was watching, all the while, my mind was screaming. I hung up the phone feeling colder than I ever had in my life. She was lying. My sister, my best friend, was lying to me. That night, the house felt different. The comfortable silence we used to share was now thick with things unsaid. I made dinner, his favorite, chicken parmesan, moving through the kitchen on autopilot. Every sound, the clink of a fork, the hum of the refrigerator, felt deafening. I was waiting. Waiting for him to come home, waiting for the confrontation I knew was coming, a storm that was about to break over our lives. He walked in just after 8, smiling, holding a bouquet of grocery store daisies. "Peace offering," he said, trying to kiss me. "Sorry I'm a little late, got stuck on a call." I turned my head so his lips met my cheek. "Who was she, Richard?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. His smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "The woman at the Gilded Grape last night. The one in the red dress. Brenda saw you." He actually had the nerve to look offended. He scoffed, setting the flowers down on the counter with a thud. Brenda? Seriously? You're going to listen to gossip from your book club friend? It was a work thing, Caroline. A networking dinner. You know how it is. A networking dinner where her hand was on your thigh? The words hung in the air between us, sharp and ugly. He ran a hand through his hair, his composure finally cracking. He started pacing the kitchen, from the sink to the stove and back again. It's not what it looks like. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Things between us, they haven't been great lately. We've been so distant. Distant? I shot back, the icy calm finally starting to crack, letting the hot rage underneath seep through. I've been working 60-hour weeks trying to make partner at my law firm, Richard. Something we talked about. Something you said you supported. I was doing it for us. For our future. While I was building our life, what were you doing? Entertaining your networking contacts? He stopped pacing and finally looked at me. The man I had loved for nearly a decade, the man I had promised to spend my life with, became a stranger right before my eyes. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a weary resignation. It's not just some random woman, he said softly, his voice heavy with a guilt that was years too late. I'm sorry, Caroline. I am so sorry. I waited, my heart pounding a sick, slow rhythm against my ribs. I knew what was coming, but I needed to hear him say it. I needed the final, brutal truth. It's Eleanor. The name dropped into the silence of our kitchen like a stone into a deep well. Eleanor. My sister. My Ellie. The bottom fell out of my world. I stumbled back, gripping the counter to keep myself from falling. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was an annihilation. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had taken the one other person in the world I trusted completely and made her an accomplice. I spent that night in the guest room, staring at the textured ceiling, replaying every moment. Every time Eleanor had hugged me and asked how I was doing. Every time Richard had said he was working late. Every laugh, every shared meal, every holiday for the past year was now tainted, twisted into a grotesque lie. They hadn't just broken my marriage. They had destroyed my past. I thought that night was rock bottom. I was wrong. Rock bottom has a basement. The next 6 weeks were a blur of hollowed-out days and sleepless nights. I moved through my life like a ghost. I'd go to work, sit in meetings about inheritance disputes and custody battles, drafting legal arguments with a clinical detachment that felt a million miles away from the raw, gaping wound in my own life. I'd come home to a house that was too quiet, too empty. Richard had moved into a corporate apartment downtown, giving me space. I tried to function. I'd open the fridge, stare at its contents, and then close it again, the thought of eating making me sick. I lost weight. Dark circles formed under my eyes. I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and see a stranger looking back, a thin, haunted version of the woman I used to be. Friends called. Brenda was a rock, checking in every day, offering to bring over food I wouldn't eat, or just to sit in silence with me so I wouldn't be alone. But I couldn't bring myself to talk about it with anyone else. How do you even begin to explain it? My husband and my sister are having an affair. The words felt like poison in my mouth. And Eleanor, she tried to call. Dozens of times. Her name would flash on my phone screen, a beacon of her treachery. I never answered. She sent texts. Long, rambling messages filled with pathetic excuses and pleas for forgiveness. I never meant for this to happen, Caroline. It just happened. I miss you. Please talk to me. You're my sister. Richard and we have something real. Can't you try to understand? I deleted every single one without replying. She was dead to me. The sister I had loved was gone, replaced by this monster stranger who could look me in the eye and lie for months while she slept with my husband. I was just starting to contemplate the next step, whether I should call a marriage counselor or a divorce attorney, when he showed up. It was a Tuesday evening. I was trying to read a book, but I'd been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. The doorbell rang, and my heart seized. I knew it was him. I opened the door to find both of them standing there. Richard, looking pale and nervous. And Eleanor, standing slightly behind him, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the ground, a picture of false contrition. "We need to talk," Richard said, his voice quiet. I didn't move. I just stood there, blocking the doorway to the home they had desecrated. "There's nothing left to say." "Please, Caroline," he said. "Just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. They walked into the living room, the room where we'd hosted Christmas, where we'd opened wedding gifts. The air felt thick with betrayal. "What?" I asked, my voice cold and hard. Richard took a deep breath. He looked at Eleanor, a quick, nervous glance, and she gave him a slight nod. It was a gesture of solidarity between them, another knife in my heart. He turned back to me, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of panic and, was that excitement? "There's something you need to know," he said. "Eleanor's pregnant." The 3 words just hung there in the air. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard him right. The world seemed to go silent, all sound sucked into a vacuum. Pregnant. My sister was pregnant with my husband's child. Richard must have seen the utter devastation on my face because he added, unnecessarily, "It's mine." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt this strange, hollow sensation, like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped everything out, leaving nothing but an echo. My voice, when it finally came, didn't even sound like my own. "How far along?" "Almost 3 months," Eleanor whispered, finally looking at me. There were no tears in her eyes. No remorse. Just a kind of defiant resolve. 3 months. The timeline was a brutal, mathematical confirmation of their lies. This wasn't a recent mistake. This had been going on for a long, long time. While I was working late to build our future, they were busy creating a new one without me. The divorce proceedings were swift but brutal. Richard wanted it done quickly, no surprise there, with a baby on the way. The man who once promised to love me in sickness and in health was now arguing through his lawyer about who should get the good silverware. It wasn't about the stuff, of course. It was about control. It was about him trying to manage the narrative, to not look like the villain he so clearly was. But here's the thing about being a lawyer yourself, you know the game. You know how to prepare, and sometimes, you notice things other people miss. The first red flag that suggested there was more to this story appeared during a settlement meeting in a sterile, impersonal conference room. Eleanor came along, her baby bump now showing prominently under a tight-fitting dress that seemed specifically designed to twist the knife. But it wasn't her presence that caught my attention. It was the way she kept checking her phone, her thumb swiping nervously across the screen. Twice, she got up and stepped out into the hallway to take a call, her voice a low, urgent murmur. Richard just sighed and told his lawyer, "She's just nervous about the baby." But I saw the look in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, a shadow of annoyance that he quickly masked. The second flag came a few weeks later. I had to drop off some signed documents at the mediator's office. As I walked down the hall, I heard her voice coming from around the corner. She was on the phone again. "Don't worry about him," she was saying, her tone sharp and dismissive. "He has no idea. Just keep it together for a few more months. Once the baby is here, everything will be fine." At the time, I assumed she was talking to a friend, complaining about the stress of the situation with Richard. Later, I'd understand it was something else entirely. The third and most unsettling flag appeared at a required court appearance. It was a crowded, miserable hallway filled with other couples untangling their lives. Walter, Richard's best friend since college, showed up to offer his support. Walter had been a constant in our lives. Best man at our wedding, godfather to a child we never had, a fixture at every Super Bowl party and summer barbecue. He was a good man, steady and loyal. What was unusual was how Eleanor physically recoiled when he approached. As Walter came toward our awkward little group, she suddenly clutched her stomach and announced she needed to find the restroom, practically running down the hall. Walter just stopped, a confused and hurt expression on his face. He looked different, too. Subdued, almost unable to look Richard in the eye. I saw him try to say something to Richard, but the words seemed to die on his lips. I filed these observations away, pieces of a puzzle I didn't yet understand. It was all strange, but my life was a chaotic mess of strangeness at that point, so I just pushed it aside and focused on getting through the day. 3 days after that court appearance, my doorbell rang. It was 9:30 at night, dark and raining outside. I wasn't expecting anyone. My social circle had shrunk dramatically since Richard left. It's amazing how many couple friends suddenly have scheduling conflicts when you're newly single and carrying the baggage of a messy, scandalous divorce. I peered through the peephole to see a figure huddled on my porch, shoulders hunched against the rain. It was Walter. He looked terrible. Unshaven, hair disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes that made him look like he hadn't slept in a week. I opened the door, genuinely confused. We'd always been friendly, but he was Richard's friend, not mine. He'd never visited me alone. Walter? Is everything okay? He looked up, and I was startled to see his eyes were red-rimmed. No, he said, his voice hoarse. Nothing's okay. Can I come in? I need to talk to you, Caroline. I stepped aside, a sense of foreboding washing over me. He followed me into the kitchen, the room where my life had shattered just a couple of months before. The house felt too big now, its silence amplifying my loneliness. Do you want something to drink? I offered automatically, a hostess on autopilot. Coffee? Wine? Something stronger? Whatever you're having, he mumbled, sinking into a chair at the kitchen island. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I poured us both a generous glass of Cabernet I'd opened earlier, my own attempt at self-medication. Walter took his with a shaking hand and immediately drank half of it in one gulp. He stared into the glass for a long moment before he finally spoke. I've been trying to do the right thing, he began, his voice barely a whisper. Trying to figure out what that even is anymore. But I can't sleep. I can't eat. I can't look at myself in the mirror. I waited, sensing that whatever he had to say required patience. This wasn't a social call. This was a confession. He took another shaky sip of wine and finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine. It's about Eleanor, he said. And the baby. My stomach tightened into a cold, hard knot. What about them? He set his glass down and covered his face with his hands. When he looked up again, there were tears glistening in his eyes. Raw, agonizing tears. The baby, he choked out, the words seeming to tear their way out of his throat. The baby might be mine, Caroline. The words hung in the air between us, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself, my mind refusing to process what he'd just said. What? What are you saying, Walter? He took a deep, shuddering breath. Eleanor and we were together. Before she and Richard started, at least, I thought it was before. Now, I'm not so sure about the timeline. You and Eleanor? I couldn't keep the shock from my voice. Walter? Loyal, dependable Walter? It didn't make sense. It started at the company Christmas party last year, he confessed, his gaze dropping back to his wineglass. Richard had that early flight to the Chicago conference the next morning, remember? He left early. I nodded, my mind racing back. I remembered that night. Richard had come home just after 10, stressed about his presentation. Eleanor and we ended up talking at the bar, Walter continued, his voice thick with shame. We were both a little drunk. One thing led to another. We went back to her apartment. I'm not proud of it, Caroline. It was a mistake. It was supposed to be a one-time thing. But it wasn't, I guessed, my voice flat. He shook his head miserably. No. We kept meeting up. For about 2 months. It was just. I don't know what it was. An escape, I guess. Then, suddenly, she ghosted me. Just stopped answering my calls, my texts. No explanation. He took a long swallow of wine, finishing the glass. The next thing I know, maybe 2 weeks later, Richard pulls me aside, all excited, telling me he thinks there might be something starting between him and Eleanor. He asked if I thought it was a bad idea, because she was your sister. And what did you say? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. What could I say? He pleaded, his eyes desperate for me to understand. Could I say, hey man, I was sleeping with her first, and she just dumped me for no reason? I was stunned. I was hurt. But he's my best friend. He seemed happy, happier than he'd been in a long time. So I said nothing. I thought it was over between us. I figured she'd chosen him over me. Until you found out she was pregnant, I concluded, the pieces of the puzzle starting to click into place with a sickening finality. He nodded, his face pale. The timing. I did the math over and over again in my head. It could be either of us. And lately she's been texting me again. Calling late at night. Saying things like how she made a mistake choosing Richard. How we should talk about options. He looked utterly anguished. It would destroy him, Caroline. He is so excited about being a father. He's reading baby books, he's painting the nursery, he bought a damn minivan, for God's sake. Show me, I said, my voice hardening. All the broken-hearted grief I'd been drowning in for months was suddenly replaced by a cold, clear rage. This wasn't just a simple, sordid affair anymore. This was a conspiracy. Walter fumbled with his phone, his hands still shaking, and handed it to me. I scrolled through the text messages from Eleanor, my shock deepening with each one. This should have been our news to share, not mine and his. We need to talk about what happens after the baby comes. I made a mistake. Richard doesn't need to know everything. We could work something out. And the most recent one, from just 2 days ago, the one that made my blood run cold, the baby's starting to kick. Don't you want to feel it? I handed the phone back, feeling sick to my stomach. Do you have any other proof? Walter hesitated, then nodded slowly. I have pictures. From when we were together. Selfies she sent me. And there's a hotel receipt. We stayed at the Westin downtown one weekend when Richard was at that sales conference in Phoenix. That was in late February. According to Richard, the baby was due in late November. The dates matched perfectly. My mind was racing, assembling the timeline, the lies, the sheer audacity of it all. There's more, isn't there? I said, looking him straight in the eye. You wouldn't be here, risking everything, just because of some old receipts and suggestive texts. Something else happened recently. Something that pushed you over the edge. He stared at me for a long moment, then reached back for his phone, his expression grim. She sent me this 2 days ago. He pulled up a video message and pressed play. Eleanor's face filled the screen, her expression intimate, secretive, the kind of look I'd seen her give me 1,000 times, only now it was meant for someone else. Hey you, she cooed, her voice a seductive whisper. I miss seeing you. We need to figure this out before things get too complicated. She paused, a sly smile playing on her lips. The doctor says it's a boy, by the way. Then came the killing blow. He looks just like you in the ultrasound, she laughed softly. I swear, he has your nose. Thank God. Richard's nose would be a tragedy to pass on. Anyway, Richard doesn't suspect anything. He's so caught up in the daddy fantasy, he hasn't even questioned why I won't let him come to the appointments anymore. We need to talk, Walter. For real. Call me. The video ended. I felt a pure, unadulterated rage building inside me. A rage not just for myself, but for the stupid, blind men who had thrown our marriage away for this. Whatever Richard had done to me, he didn't deserve this level of calculated, cruel manipulation. I wish I'd never met her, Walter whispered, his voice cracking. She's destroying everything. Does she know you have all of this? I asked, my mind already working, the gears of the lawyer inside me starting to turn. The texts, the video, the receipts? No, he said. I've just been collecting it, I guess. Trying to figure out what to do. A plan began to form in my mind. A plan for truth. For clarity. And yes, for consequences. I heard through the grapevine they're having a dinner, I said, my voice measured and calm. At Bellini's. This Friday night. Once the divorce is final. To celebrate their new beginning. Walter winced, the words physically paining him. Yeah. Richard invited me. I told him I couldn't make it. Couldn't stomach it. I reached across the table and put my hand on his arm. His skin was cold. What if we both went? His eyes widened in alarm. You want to confront them? Publicly? I want the truth to come out, I corrected him, my voice firm. In a way that can't be denied, or minimized, or explained away later in private. Don't you think Richard deserves that much? To know the truth, the whole truth, in a way that she can't twist or manipulate? I leaned forward, my gaze intense. Think about it, Walter. If you tell him privately, what happens? She'll cry. She'll deny it. She'll say you're a jealous ex, that you're obsessed with her. She'll turn him against you, and he'll believe her, because he wants to believe her. He has a minivan, remember? He's already invested in the fantasy. He was quiet for a long time, turning my words over in his head. The logic was undeniable. He had seen firsthand how manipulative she could be. Finally, he nodded slowly. Yeah, he does. But Caroline, this will destroy our friendship. Richard and me, we're done after this. Your friendship was destroyed the moment Eleanor came between you, I said gently, but with an edge of steel. This is just acknowledging the wreckage. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. It felt like preparing for a major court case. Walter sent me everything he had, dozens of texts, photos, the video, the hotel receipt. I printed it all out, organizing it in a neat manila folder. Each piece of paper was a nail in the coffin of their lies. The night before the dinner, Walter called me, his voice strained with panic. He was on the verge of backing out. Maybe we should just talk to him privately, he suggested, his voice weak. This feels so cruel, Caroline. Doing it in front of all their friends. I understood his hesitation. It was harsh. It feels harsh because it is harsh, I acknowledged. But the truth is harsh, Walter. And honestly? Part of me wants witnesses. Not for revenge, but for accountability. I have spent months being the subject of whispers and pity while Richard paraded my pregnant sister around town. I've been the crazy, bitter ex-wife who couldn't accept that her husband had moved on. Some truths deserve an audience, so they can't be swept under the rug later. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his ragged breathing. Finally, he sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion and resignation. "You're right," he said. "I'll meet you there tomorrow night." I barely slept that night. I kept questioning myself. Was I doing this for justice, or for vengeance? Was there even a difference at this point? By morning, I had settled into a strange calm. Whatever my mixed motives, the truth deserved to be heard. And I was going to be the one to deliver it. I chose my outfit carefully. Not something flashy, not something designed to compete with Eleanor. I chose the simple, navy blue sheath dress I'd worn to argue my first major case in court. My power dress. It was my armor. Professional, confident, unassailable. I arrived at Bellini's 10 minutes early, clutching the manila envelope containing all our evidence. It felt heavy in my hand, heavy with the weight of shattered lives. Walter was waiting outside, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, looking like he was about to be physically sick. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted as I approached, his face pale under the warm evening lights of the restaurant. I squeezed his arm, trying to impart some of my own cold resolve. "You can. We can. It's the right thing to do, Walter. Even if it's the hard thing." We walked inside. The hostess, a young woman named Maria, recognized me immediately. Richard and I had been regulars there for years, celebrating birthdays, anniversaries. "Mrs. Sterling," she said with a warm smile, then caught herself, her expression faltering. "I mean, Ms. Reed. It's good to see you." Back to my maiden name. "You too, Maria," I said calmly. "We're meeting the Sterling party." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh. I'm not sure if." "It's fine," I assured her, cutting her off before she could protest. "They're expecting us." A necessary lie. She led us toward the private dining room at the back of the restaurant, her discomfort evident in her stiff posture. I could hear the sounds of laughter and cheerful conversation before we even reached the door. Happy sounds. Celebration sounds. The sounds of a life built on my ashes. We walked in. The conversation didn't stop immediately. It took a moment, like watching a wave recede from the shore, the silence spreading gradually from where we stood until the entire room fell quiet. There were about 20 people there, friends, a few of Richard's colleagues, all of them smiling and raising glasses of champagne. Then they saw us. Richard froze, his glass halfway to his lips. Eleanor, sitting beside him, her hand on her swollen belly, clutching his other arm possessively, went visibly pale. "Caroline," Richard managed to say, his voice strained. Then his eyes shifted to the man standing beside me, and confusion replaced his shock. "Walter? I thought you couldn't make it." "Change of plans," Walter said, his voice surprisingly steady. I smiled. It wasn't an angry smile, or a sad one. Just a small, composed smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Hello, Richard." "Eleanor. We're sorry to interrupt." I let my eyes drift over the festive table, the flowers, the gift bags. "We just thought we should deliver our wedding gift in person." Confusion crossed Richard's face. "The divorce was finalized yesterday, Caroline," he said carefully. "There's no need for—" "Oh, I know," I interrupted, stepping further into the room. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "That's why the timing seems so perfect. You're celebrating new beginnings, right? Well, I thought you deserved to begin with the truth." Eleanor's hand tightened on Richard's arm. "I think you should leave," she said, her voice brittle. "This is a private party." "We'll leave soon enough," I promised, my voice resonating in the dead silence of the room. I opened the manila folder. "But first, I think Richard deserves to know exactly what, and who, he's celebrating." Richard looked between me and Walter, a weary frustration creeping into his expression. "What is going on?" Walter stepped forward, his face grim. "I need to tell you something, man." Something I should have told you months ago. Walter, don't, Eleanor hissed, her eyes flashing with panic. But he ignored her, his focus entirely on Richard. Eleanor and I were together, he said, his voice low but clear. Before you two started dating. At least, that's what I thought. Now, I'm not so sure about the timeline. Richard's face hardened. What are you talking about? We were seeing each other for a couple of months, Walter continued, his voice gaining strength. It started at the Christmas party, after you left early for that Chicago trip. Richard's eyes darted to Eleanor, who was shaking her head frantically. He's lying, she insisted, her voice rising. He's obsessed with me. We barely knew each other then. I wish I was lying, Richard, Walter said sadly. He pulled out his phone. But I have proof. Texts. Photos. Receipts from hotels where we stayed together, including the weekend you were in Phoenix. The weekend that, according to the due date, is when this baby was conceived. The room erupted in whispers. Several guests slipped away, embarrassed to be witnessing such a personal implosion. Show me, Richard demanded, his voice flat and dangerous. Walter handed him the phone. I watched as Richard scrolled through, his expression shifting from disbelief, to shock, to utter devastation. He looked like he'd been physically struck. This doesn't prove anything about the baby. Eleanor cried, desperation creeping into her voice. So what if we had a thing? It was over long before you and I got serious. Then explain this, I said quietly. I pulled the printed ultrasound photo from my folder, the one she had sent to Walter, and placed it on the table in front of Richard. He picked it up with a trembling hand. He read the caption she had so stupidly, so arrogantly included. He read it once. Twice. Then he looked up at my sister, his eyes filled with such raw, agonizing pain that for a fleeting moment, I almost regretted our decision. Is this true? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. He held up the photo. Does he have Walter's nose? He looked at Walter, then back at Eleanor, his face a mask of crumbling disbelief. Is this baby? Is he Walter's? The silence that followed was deafening. Someone in the back of the room mumbled an excuse and slipped out. Then another. Soon, a steady stream of guests was making for the exit, uncomfortable witnesses to the unraveling of a fraud. Eleanor, to her credit, didn't crumble immediately. She tried denial first. They're making this up, she insisted, reaching for Richard's hand. He pulled away from her touch as if he'd been burned. They're bitter. They're trying to ruin our happiness. But her performance lost its power as Walter quietly continued providing evidence. He played the video message. The entire room heard her cooing about the baby having Walter's nose. He read aloud the texts about their options after the birth. He placed the hotel receipts on the table, the dates precisely matching the conception timeline. Ask her, Walter suggested softly, why she won't let you come to the doctor appointments anymore. Richard's face, already pale, went ashen. He turned to Eleanor. Is that true? Her strategy shifted instantly from denial to victimhood. Tears, perfect and glistening, appeared on cue. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, she cried. I was confused. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. You knew exactly what you were doing, I corrected her calmly, my voice cutting through her manufactured hysterics. I placed another document on the table. A printed statement from a former colleague of hers I'd managed to track down, detailing how Eleanor had bragged about having 2 men wrapped around her finger. You were keeping Walter as your insurance plan while you secured Richard's financial stability. You told your friend, and I quote, Richard has better long-term prospects, but Walter is the one who's really in love with me. It's good to have a backup. You talked to Sarah? Eleanor gasped, genuine shock finally replacing her calculated tears. I did, I confirmed. she said, and again I quote, "This has gone too far." That was the final blow. Richard collapsed back into his chair, pressing the palms of his hands against his eyes as if he could physically block out the truth. When he finally looked up, there were tears streaming down his face. Not pretty movie tears. Ugly, broken sobs that shook his entire body and made his breath come in ragged gasps. He looked at Eleanor, the woman he had destroyed our marriage for. "I left my wife for you," he choked out, the words ripped from his soul. "I threw away my marriage for this, for a lie." He just sat there, broken. And as I looked at the man I once loved, reduced to this, I knew my life would never be the same. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll know you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement and means the world to me. Please, comment with the number 1, and then listen as I tell you the rest of my story. The mask slipped. With all her escape routes cut off and her audience of sympathizers gone, the real Eleanor finally showed herself. The calculating, cold woman beneath the sunny, girl-next-door facade was laid bare. "Oh, please," she sneered, her tears vanishing as if they'd never been there. She began gathering her purse, her movements sharp and angry. "You were looking for an exit from your boring marriage long before I came along. I just gave you an excuse." Her words hit me like a physical blow, but I held my composure. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about truth having its moment, however painful. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Richard demanded, his voice raw with grief, looking from Eleanor to Walter. "After the baby was born, were you ever going to let me know I was raising another man's child?" Walter looked genuinely remorseful. "I've been struggling with this for weeks, man. I swear, I didn't know what to do. You were so excited about being a dad. So you were just going to let me live this life forever?" Richard's voice rose, anger finally breaking through his grief. "I didn't know for sure," Walter defended weakly. "Not until recently." Eleanor scoffed, standing up from the table. "This is ridiculous. I don't have to listen to this." She turned to Richard. "Are you coming, or what?" The few remaining guests watched in uncomfortable silence as Richard stared at her, truly seeing her for the very first time. "No," he said finally, his voice flat and dead. "I'm not coming. Not now. Not ever again." Her confidence wavered for just a second. This clearly wasn't how she'd expected the confrontation to play out. "Fine," she snapped. "Your loss." With that, she stormed out of the private dining room, leaving a stunned, heavy silence in her wake. I should have felt triumphant. This was the moment I had planned for. The villain exposed, the truth revealed. But watching Richard sitting there, broken and humiliated, I felt only a profound sadness for what we had all lost. The remaining guests took this as their cue to tactfully exit, mumbling awkward goodbyes until only Richard, Walter, and I remained in the room, surrounded by the debris of our intertwined lives. Richard turned to Walter, a lifetime of friendship hanging in the balance between them. "You slept with her, knowing I was interested." "It started before I knew you were seeing her, I swear," Walter said, his voice pleading. "And when you told me about you two, I backed off immediately. I ended it." "But you didn't tell me," Richard said, his voice hollow. "How could I?" Walter asked. "You were already falling for her. You seemed happy." Richard let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Yeah. Because I thought she was carrying my child. I thought I was starting a new chapter." He ran his hands through his hair. "God, I'm such an idiot." "You're not an idiot," I said gently, surprised at my own compassion. "You were deceived. We all were." He reached for my hand across the table, his touch both foreign and painfully familiar. "I'm so sorry, Caroline," he whispered, his eyes pleading. "So incredibly sorry. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. But maybe this is a sign. A chance to start over. To try again. And there it was. The moment I had both anticipated and dreaded. A part of me, the wounded part that had cried itself to sleep for months, should have rejoiced. But instead, all I felt was a quiet, unshakable certainty that that chapter of my life was truly, finally, finished. I gently withdrew my hand from his. "What happened tonight doesn't change the past year, Richard," I said softly. "It doesn't erase your choices." "I know that," he insisted, a desperate edge to his voice. "But people make mistakes. We had 7 good years. That has to count for something." "It does count for something," I agreed. "But it's in the past. It's not about deserving a second chance, Richard. It's about what's right for both of us going forward." I hesitated, then decided he deserved the whole truth. "I've been seeing someone." His face fell. The last flicker of hope in his eyes died out. "Who?" "Arthur," I said. "Arthur Collins." Recognition dawned immediately. Arthur and I had dated in college, before I met Richard. We'd reconnected at a legal conference 6 months after Richard moved out. It was slow at first, cautious. But it was good. It was peaceful. "Your college boyfriend," Richard said, his tone sharp with a new kind of pain, the pain of being replaced. "The one you said was the road not taken. I winced, hearing my own words from a long ago, late-night conversation thrown back at me. "Yes. I'm happy, Richard." The revelation seemed to hit him harder than even Eleanor's betrayal. The possibility of reconciliation had been his safety net, and I had just cut it. "So that's it?" he asked bitterly. "You get your revenge and I get nothing?" "This wasn't about revenge," I said, standing up, my power dress feeling less like armor and more like just a dress. "It was about truth. You deserve to know who you were building a life with. What you do with that truth now, that's up to you." I left the folder of evidence on the table and turned to walk away. "Does he make you happy?" Richard asked, his voice small. "Happier than I did?" I paused at the door. "It's different," I said finally. "I'm different. The past year changed me. I loved you, Richard. But love isn't always enough, is it? Sometimes trust matters more." And with that, I walked out of Bellini's and into the rest of my life. That night was 8 months ago. The aftermath unfolded in ways none of us could have predicted. Eleanor moved back to our hometown in Oregon, apparently to be near her family as her due date approached. Our parents, who were devastated and caught in an impossible situation, tried to maintain a fragile peace, but our family holidays are different now. Strained. To my surprise, and I think to everyone's, Walter followed her. He didn't go back to her romantically, too much damage had been done. But he was determined to be present for his child's birth and to take responsibility as a father. He found a job out there. They're not together, but from what I hear, they're trying to establish a healthy co-parenting relationship for their son's sake. The baby, a boy they named Dylan, was born 2 months after that night at Bellini's. I've seen pictures. He has Walter's eyes. Richard took the promotion he had been offered and transferred to the company's Seattle office. A fresh start, away from the whispers and the pitying glances. We exchange occasional, polite texts, on birthdays, major holidays, but nothing substantial. I heard from Brenda that he's in therapy, trying to understand the choices that led him to where he is. I truly hope he finds the answers he's looking for. As for me, Arthur and I are still together. We bought a house in the suburbs 3 months ago. Nothing fancy, but it has a garden where I'm trying, and failing, to grow tomatoes, and a big oak tree in the backyard. We're talking about getting married next spring. A small ceremony, just family and close friends. It's a quiet happiness, a peaceful love, and it's exactly what I need. Sometimes, I think about that night. About the pain, the anger, the wreckage. The hardest lesson I've learned through all of this is that sometimes the people you love the most, the ones you would trust with your life, are capable of causing you the greatest pain. But the second hardest lesson is equally important: surviving that pain doesn't have to make you bitter. It can make you wiser. I don't regret walking into Bellini's that night. I don't regret exposing the truth, even publicly. What I do regret, occasionally, are the 7 years I spent with someone who could walk away so easily. But then I remind myself that those years weren't wasted. They were preparing me for where I am now, for who I am now. And honestly, I like this version of me much better. She's stronger, clearer about what she wants, and far less willing to compromise on the things that truly matter, like trust and respect. So no, this isn't just a story about revenge, though it might sound like one. It's a story about truth, about consequences, and about the profound peace that comes from finally closing a door that needed to be closed. And most importantly, it's about learning to trust yourself again when your trust in others has been shattered. Because at the end of the day, that's the foundation everything else is built on. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, I'd be so grateful if you'd share your thoughts in the comments. Knowing I'm not alone in these struggles means more than you know. Take care of yourselves.